I greet you all with love. Today I'm going to talk about kind of a difficult topic for many people, fear of death. And in many ways, the fear of death has been amplified in our society and allowed people to be really controlled by the fear of death. And that makes us very vulnerable. Death is a normal part of life. I've been exposed to it in a variety of ways, and so maybe it's a little bit easier for me to talk about it. Pretty much everybody in my family died by the time I was 33. And as a doctor, at least in the emergency room type experience, you get to see this a lot. I remember one day in Oakland, it was a really hard day. First starts off with this, they're wheeling somebody down on a table, and I'm chasing after him, giving orders what to do, and I get there, and it's like this teenager with a bullet hole in his heart. It's like, oh, that was, and then the next thing is that there's a person, a drug addict who had pretty much blown out his veins, who's having a heart attack, and nobody could get into his veins to give him what he needed. Needed meaning some morphine to relax, and he was in extreme fear, and his wife's at the door. I can't get into the vein. The head emergency room doctor can't get into the vein, and he died right there. Okay. The third was the hardest for me because somebody had been in a car accident and his spleen was ruptured. And this was a Sunday. No surgeon was available. And that's how my brother died, was in a car accident with a ruptured spleen. And I'm having to relive this, and we're trying to get some surgeon, but they're not available. I've got an IV running in both arms, both legs, trying to replace his blood loss that's going on. And I'm just reliving my brother's death. And it's like, and unfortunately, surgeon never showed up. And in front of my eyes, he just faded out and internally bled to death. It's like, wow. I was actually kind of, I had to sit down. I mean, basically, I was in kind of semi-shock. It's like, this is too much. But the nurses wanted to know if I wanted to go home. No, I'll just sit for a little bit. Let's see what I can do. Yes, I did recover. It took me about a half hour, but I did. And it brings me to what we're doing in our society. And I work all over the world. I see all kinds of poverty and starvation, people dying from these things. And what is kind of shocking for me is to see how people in the Western world, primarily in the United States, are being controlled by amping up the fear of death. Yeah, you know what? You have a chance if you go outside of being struck by lightning. Okay, that's how much our kids have a chance of dying from this. Yet they're shutting the schools down. But if you look at the statistics, kids really are not very susceptible to any virus at a high level of death rate at all. It's like minimal. You're really talking about people who are in their 80s, who are literally more than half the people who are dying of this. But we don't want to minimize that, okay? Actually, you want to take care of people. You actually want to give them, like I did with my mother and Shanti's mother, an optimal natural death experience and move them into the next plane of existence. And in the Eastern traditions and really Western traditions, the idea is to have a really conscious leaving of your body. Okay, so there is something very important about it, and I certainly have explored and made every effort with the close people in my life at the mother level who have left their body to make it really an optimally positive experience, like natural childbirth, natural death. Okay, so I'm not ignoring the importance of death. It's very important. And in the yogic traditions and really the Torah traditions, what you're thinking at the time you die is where you go. So by surrounding people with love and peace and chanting the name of God, we can be an incredible help to giving people a positive death. And since I've done this a lot, unfortunately, with my whole family and others, I know I have some real experience with this. And death isn't something to be afraid of. It's a natural part of life. And as many people pointed out, the majority of the people who are dying are in their 80s, and that's a little bit more part of their life. And I don't mean to be callous. I'm not talking like the governors who are taking people with COVID virus infection, putting them in nursing homes so all the other people are dying. No, I'm not talking about homicide here. I'm really talking about how we need to honor people with this and not be in fear. So that fear of death is also beginning to control how we make decisions in society. Nobody should die. Well, that just isn't real. It's just totally unrealistic in any level of thinking. But if we're making our decisions on fear of death thinking, we can't really see the bigger picture. So you do a lockdown here, which really hasn't worked. I mean, all around the world we see where they didn't do lockdowns, people did just as well. Sweden and Japan and Belarus, nothing, no difference in the results. What's the difference is you do a lockdown here and we're starving, estimate 130 million people to death in Africa. That's not really acceptable to me. But that's all based on a fear decision. And we're shutting down society. The research really does suggest that very little transmission happens outdoors. It's more with indoors. So people are wearing masks outdoors. Okay, you can't breathe so well, but really the risk is absolutely minimal. But we're amplifying the fear. And when you let people amplify the fear, you can be controlled. That's what's really going on. So we're basically shutting down society based on the fear of death rather than how do we recreate a normal way of being. And if you look at Sweden, they didn't really have any statistically significant difference with a lockdown and the amount of deaths in previous years when the virus wasn't there. It's about the same. And you look at other places, it's about the same. So they're emphasizing something because fear controls. And then you want to be safe. There's no safety in this world. It's never been that way. Life is always at a certain risk. You walk outside and you drive a car, there's a risk. Okay? And we go on and on with that, but the point is our minds have been affected that we're really afraid to live our lives and be willing to be contracted. That's a big danger because we're also willing to give up our not just civil rights, but just our rights to be a human being, our rights to socialize, all the 6-foot distance, which there's no scientific evidence for, whatever, becomes like a social ritual. It has no meaning. So we have to look at that and say, how are they getting away with this? Because we're emphasizing our fear of death. It's making it much bigger, and therefore it controls people. So in a way, it's time for us to kind of step back a little bit and understand death is a natural part of life. Our souls are eternal. There is no death for the soul. And when we go inside to know the truth of who we are, that fear of death goes away. And that's really the answer. When we meditate, we go inside, we remember the truth of who we are. We are eternal. There's no death for the self. And once you realize that, which is really the cure for this, in a sense, and I'll say cure, once you realize we're immortal, then that fear of death goes away. So I want to bless everybody that we're able to overcome our fear of death, or let's say our greatly amplified fear of death, by knowing the truth of who we are, by meditating and living a life connected to the divine, turning to God and what we're doing. And that way, that fear of death is minimized. We can be at peace, and we go about living our lives at the most elevated way. Blessings to everyone. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Takulaisan. Peace be with you.